He was only 12 when he found them, his mother's hand still clutching a photograph, his father's eyes open, staring at nothing. The blood hadn't even dried when the boy made a promise that would consume the next decade of his life. 10 years is a long time to carry rage in your chest like a second heartbeat. Long enough to transform a terrified child into something else entirely. Something dangerous, something calculated. And when he finally returned to the town that buried his childhood, no one recognized the ghost walking among them. Stay with me. What comes next isn't just about revenge. It's about what revenge costs when you finally hold it in your hands. The autumn wind carried memories through the streets of Millbrook, a town so small that everyone knew everyone's secrets, or so they thought. October had painted the maple trees in shades of crimson and gold, the same colors that had stained the hardwood floors of the Morrison house a decade ago. The house still stood on Elderbury Lane, abandoned, windows like hollow eyes watching the neighborhood that had moved on too quickly from tragedy. His name was Daniel Morrison, though he'd stopped using that name years ago. He'd become someone else in the decade since that September night, someone harder, someone who'd spent 10 years preparing for this moment, studying, training, investigating from a distance. The boy who'd hidden in the closet while his parents were murdered had died that night too. What returned to Millbrook was something forged in the fire of unanswered questions and cold justice denied. The official story had been a home invasion gone wrong. 2 transients passing through town never caught, vanished into the night like smoke. The case went cold within months. The police chief at the time, a man named Gerald Brecker, had given the media sound bites about limited resources and the difficulty of tracking transients. The town had held a candlelight vigil, sent casseroles, and then, as towns do, moved on. Daniel had been sent to live with an aunt in Chicago, and Millbrook breathed easier once the reminder of their failure left. But Daniel never moved on. He couldn't. Because from his hiding place in that closet, he'd seen something the police never discovered. Through the slats in the door, in the chaos of those terrible moments, he'd glimpsed a tattoo on one of the killer's wrists. Not the crude prison ink of drifters, but something specific. A symbol. A compass rose with 13 points. And years later, while working construction jobs to fund his investigation, he'd seen that symbol again in a photograph from an old newspaper article about local business leaders. The same symbol worn as a lapel pin by 3 prominent Millbrook citizens at a charity gala. That's when Daniel understood. His parents weren't killed by strangers. They were murdered by people who belonged to Millbrook, people who still walked its streets, people who thought they were safe. The investigation that followed consumed him. He taught himself to hack, to follow paper trails, to understand forensic science. He worked dead-end jobs and lived in rooms barely bigger than closets, pouring every dollar into private investigators and archived records. Slowly, painfully, he assembled the truth. His father, Marcus Morrison, had been an accountant for several local businesses, honest to a fault, and he'd discovered something. Embezzlement, money laundering, connections to organized crime filtering money through Millbrook's respectable facades. Marcus had done the right thing. He'd compiled evidence, prepared to go to the authorities, but he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd confided in someone he trusted, someone who'd betrayed him. And on that September night, they'd come not just to silence Marcus, but to retrieve every piece of evidence he'd gathered. They'd torn through the house, methodical and thorough, and when Daniel's mother, Sarah, had tried to fight back, tried to protect the safe where Marcus kept his files, they'd killed her too. The boy in the closet had been overlooked. A mercy, perhaps, or maybe just an error in a plan that had otherwise gone perfectly. The killers had found what they came for, or so they thought. What they didn't know was that Marcus Morrison, paranoid and careful, had made copies, hidden them. And he'd told his son where. If anything ever happens to me, Danny, there's a box buried under the oak tree behind Grandma's old cabin. You remember the one with the lightning scar? That's where the truth lives. Daniel had been 10 when his father said those words, thinking it was just another one of Dad's weird games. But 2 years later, those words became a roadmap, a purpose, a reason to survive when grief tried to drown him. Now at 22, Daniel walked through Millbrook wearing a carefully constructed identity. He'd changed his appearance, subtle alterations that transformed the gangly 12-year-old into someone unrecognizable. He'd dyed his hair darker, wore colored contacts, and the years had reshaped his face from boy to man. He'd returned as David Martinez, a freelance journalist researching small-town America for a book. The perfect cover, the perfect excuse to ask questions. His first stop was the coffee shop on Main Street, a place that had opened after he'd left. The kind of establishment that served as the town's nerve center, where gossip flowed more freely than the overpriced lattes. The woman behind the counter, maybe mid-30s with kind eyes, smiled as he entered. "New in town?" she asked, already preparing the daily special without being asked. "Just visiting," Daniel replied, returning the smile. "Doing some research. Millbrook seems like it has some interesting history." "Oh, we've got history all right, though most of it's the boring kind. This place has been the same for 50 years, give or take." She slid the coffee across the counter. "I'm Melissa, by the way. My family's been here forever." "David," he offered, taking the cup. "Forever sounds like a long time. You must know everyone then." Melissa laughed. "Everyone in their business, unfortunately. Small-town curse." Her smile faded slightly. "Though we had our dark moment. About 10 years back, the Morrison murders. That shook everyone pretty hard." Daniel's grip tightened imperceptibly on the cup. "Murders? In a place like this?" "A couple. Good people. They had a kid too. Home invasion, they said. Never caught who did it." Melissa shook her head. "The house is still empty. No one wants to buy it, even though it's beautiful. Too many ghosts, I guess." "That's terrible. The kid? What happened to him?" "Went to live with relatives. Out of state, I think. Can't blame him for not wanting to come back. This place probably holds nothing but nightmares for him." If only she knew how right she was, but Daniel kept his expression neutral, sympathetic. "Was there ever any resolution? Did they have suspects?" Melissa glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "Between you and me, there were always rumors. Nothing concrete, but people talk. Some folks thought it wasn't random at all. That Marcus Morrison, the husband, might have been into something. But that's just small-town conspiracy talk. The police said it was transients." "What do you think?" She paused, studying him with eyes that suddenly seemed sharper. "I think truth and official stories aren't always the same thing, but I also think some questions are dangerous to ask in a town like this, even 10 years later." There it was, the acknowledgement that even civilians sensed something wrong beneath Millbrook's pleasant surface. Daniel filed it away, another piece in the puzzle he was reassembling. He spent the rest of that first day walking the streets, reacquainting himself with a place that felt both intimately familiar and utterly foreign. The hardware store where his father used to buy weekend project supplies. The park where his mother had pushed him on swings. The library where he'd spent summer afternoons. Every corner held memories, and every memory fueled the purpose that had brought him home. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Daniel found himself standing across the street from his childhood home. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown. A real estate sign had faded to illegibility in the front lawn. He stood there as shadows lengthened, and for just a moment he was 12 again, frozen in terror, as footsteps thundered through the house and his mother's screams were cut short. But he wasn't 12 anymore. He was what they'd created, and he'd come to show them exactly what that meant. The Millbrook Public Library hadn't changed much in 10 years. The same musty smell of old books and furniture polish greeted Daniel as he pushed through the heavy oak doors. The same librarian, Mrs. Patterson, now greyer and more stooped, sat behind the circulation desk sorting returns. She'd been kind to him as a child, always setting aside adventure novels she thought he'd enjoy. He wondered if she'd recognize him now. He couldn't afford to find out. Daniel moved past her with his head slightly lowered, the body language of someone who belonged, who wasn't worth noticing. He headed straight for the archives section in the basement, where bound copies of the Millbrook Gazette, dating back 50 years, gathered dust. If his parents' murders had been planned by locals, there would be traces, connections, patterns in the years leading up to that night. The microfiche machine hummed to life, casting its pale glow in the dim basement. Daniel started 5 years before the murders, methodically working through every edition: society pages, business announcements, council meetings, charity events, the mundane documentation of small-town life that most people would find tedious. But Daniel had learned patience. Revenge required it. 3 hours later, he found the first thread: a photograph from a hospital fundraiser gala 7 months before his parents died. There, standing in a group of donors, were 4 men whose names he'd come to know intimately over the years. Gerald Brecker, the former police chief who'd buried the investigation; Thomas Whitmore, owner of Millbrook's largest construction company; Richard Castellano, who ran the town's only bank; and James Rothman, a lawyer with connections that stretched beyond Millbrook's borders. All 4 men wore the same lapel pin. The 13-pointed compass rose. Daniel's hands trembled as he advanced the film. 2 months later, another charity event. The same 4 men plus 2 others. 6 weeks after that, a ribbon-cutting ceremony for Whitmore Construction's new office building. Marcus Morrison stood in the background of that photo, holding a briefcase, his expression caught in a moment of tension as he looked at something off camera. His father had known. Even then, he'd known something was wrong. Daniel printed every relevant page, the old machine whirring and clicking. He was assembling the visual evidence that would corroborate what he'd learned through years of investigation. But evidence wasn't enough. He needed confessions. He needed them to reveal themselves, to turn on each other the way predators did when cornered. That required a more delicate approach. Over the next week, Daniel embedded himself in Millbrook's routine. He became a fixture at Melissa's coffee shop, at the diner on Route 12, at the bar where working men gathered after their shifts. He listened more than he spoke, absorbing the town's rhythms, learning who held power and who resented it. Small towns were pressure cookers of old grudges and unspoken hierarchies. He just needed to find the right pressure points. Thomas Whitmore still ran his construction empire from an office on Oak Street. At 63, he'd grown thick around the middle, his face ruddy from too much bourbon and too many steaks. But his eyes remained sharp, calculating. Daniel watched him from across the street, noting his patterns. Whitmore arrived at 8:30 each morning, left at 6, stopped at O'Malley's bar twice a week for drinks with associates. Richard Castellano had aged less gracefully. The banker had developed a tremor in his right hand, and Daniel noticed he took pills throughout the day. Anxiety medication, perhaps. Guilt had a way of manifesting physically. Castellano lived alone in a renovated Victorian on Maple Street, his wife having left him 4 years ago, according to public records. Gerald Brecker had retired from the police force with full honours, despite his failure to solve the town's most brutal crime. He'd bought a small farm on the outskirts of town, raised chickens, played at being a simple country retiree. But Daniel had learned that Brecker still met with Whitmore and Castellano monthly at a private club in the neighbouring county. Old habits, old alliances. James Rothman, the lawyer, was the most dangerous. He'd expanded his practice, now represented clients across 3 counties, including some with documented ties to organised crime families. He was the spider at the centre of the web, the one who'd likely orchestrated everything. Getting to him would require dismantling the others first. Daniel's plan began with the weakest link. Richard Castellano, the banker with trembling hands and a conscience that wouldn't quite stay buried. It started with a letter, delivered to Castellano's home, unmarked, untraceable. Inside, a single sentence: Marcus Morrison kept copies. They're coming to light. Daniel watched from his rental car as Castellano retrieved the mail that afternoon, watched the man's face drain of color as he read, watched him fumble with his keys, dropping them twice before managing to get inside. Through the window, Daniel could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear. The first domino had tipped. That night, Castellano met with Whitmore at O'Malley's bar. Their usual casual meetup turned urgent and tense. Daniel sat 3 booths away, close enough to observe, far enough to remain anonymous. Castellano's hands shook as he nursed a whiskey. Whitmore's jaw was tight, his voice a low growl Daniel couldn't quite hear. But the body language said everything. Fear was spreading. The next letter went to Gerald Brecker. This one included more. The boy didn't die. He remembers everything. He's coming. Brecker's response was different. The old cop's instincts kicked in. Within hours, he'd contacted a private security firm, installed new cameras around his property, and started carrying a gun again. But he also made calls. Urgent calls. And those calls led him to the same place Castellano's panic had led. To Whitmore, to Rothman, to emergency meetings of men who thought they'd buried their sins deep enough. Daniel documented everything. Photographed their meetings. Recorded conversations using long-range audio equipment he'd acquired through less-than-legal channels. Slowly, meticulously, he was forcing them out of hiding, making them visible, making them vulnerable. But he knew these letters alone wouldn't break them. These were men who'd killed to protect their secrets. Fear would make them dangerous before it made them confess. He needed something more, something that would turn them against each other, destroy the trust that had held their conspiracy together for 10 years. He found his leverage in Thomas Whitmore's construction company. Years of financial records, obtained through careful hacking and a bribed accounting clerk, revealed a pattern of fraud that went far beyond what his father had discovered. Whitmore had been skimming from every public contract, every municipal project, millions of dollars hidden in shell companies and offshore accounts, and his partners, Brecker, Castellano, and Rothman, had all taken their cuts. But the records also showed something else. Whitmore had been keeping 2 sets of books, one that showed the split distributions to his partners, and one, hidden deeper, that showed the real numbers. Whitmore had been stealing from the thieves, taking a larger share than he'd ever disclosed to the others. Perfect. Daniel crafted his masterpiece carefully. Anonymous packages delivered to each conspirator, containing financial documents that revealed Whitmore's betrayal. Not everything, just enough to spark fury, enough to make them question whether the man they'd killed for could be trusted, enough to fracture the foundation of their alliance. Sharing these stories of justice and hidden truths isn't easy, but if you feel the weight of unanswered crimes and the hunger for accountability, subscribe and join us. Your like can spread awareness that some debts never expire, and your comment can share a story that might help another soul find courage. Because revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about restoring balance to a world that looked away when it should have watched. The effect was immediate and beautiful. Within 48 hours, Brecker confronted Whitmore at his office. Daniel watched from across the street as the argument spilled into the parking lot, 2 old men, red-faced and shouting, years of partnership dissolving in accusations and rage. Castellano stopped answering Whitmore's calls, and Rothman, the careful lawyer, started distancing himself, cancelling meetings, erasing connections. The web was unraveling. But Daniel wasn't done, because fractured alliances weren't justice, they weren't the reckoning his parents deserved. He needed confessions. He needed the truth spoken aloud, recorded, undeniable. And for that he needed to become the ghost they feared most. He needed to be the boy who'd supposedly disappeared, the witness who'd supposedly forgotten, the victim who'd supposedly moved on. It was time for Daniel Morrison to come back from the dead. The Morrison house had been empty for so long that the real estate company had stopped sending anyone to check on it. The lockbox on the front door hung rusted and useless, the key inside corroded beyond function. Daniel didn't need it. He'd grown up in this house. He knew every window that didn't quite latch, every door that could be jimmied with the right pressure. He entered through the basement window on the north side, the same window he'd used to sneak out for midnight adventures when he was 10, before the world ended. Inside, dust floated in shafts of moonlight filtering through broken blinds. The furniture remained, covered in sheets like corpses at a crime scene. His footsteps echoed on hardwood floors that had once carried his mother's laughter and his father's off-key singing. The house held its breath around him, a museum of murdered innocence. He climbed the stairs to his old bedroom, each step a journey backward through time. The door still bore the sign he'd made in 4th grade. Danny's room, keep out. Inside, his childhood remained frozen. Posters of superheroes still covered the walls, their colors faded to ghosts. His bookshelf held the complete adventures of heroes who always won, who always saved the day. He'd believed in that once, believed that good triumphed and justice prevailed. His parents had taught him that. And then they'd been proven catastrophically wrong. Daniel set up his equipment in the living room, the room where it had happened. The bloodstains were long gone, cleaned by professionals who specialized in erasing such evidence, but he could still see them in his mind's eye. His mother there, by the fireplace. His father near the hallway trying to reach the phone. And himself, 12 years old and paralyzed with terror, watching through closet slats as the only world he'd ever known was destroyed. He positioned cameras in the corners, motion-activated, night vision capable, audio recorders hidden in the walls. He transformed the house into a trap, a stage for the final act. Then he sent the invitations, 4 letters, 4 names, 4 simple messages. I know what you did. Meet me at the Morrison house, midnight tomorrow. Come alone, or I send everything to the FBI. He knew they'd come. Fear and desperation would drive them. The need to silence this new threat, to eliminate the evidence before it destroyed them. They were killers who'd gotten away with murder once. They'd try again. Daniel spent the day preparing, checking every angle, every contingency. He'd learned from the best tactical experts money could buy, taken self-defense courses from instructors who didn't ask questions. He'd transformed himself from victim to predator. But even predators could be outnumbered, overpowered. He couldn't afford mistakes. As darkness fell, he took his position in the house's attic, accessible through a hidden panel in the hallway ceiling. From there, he could see everything through carefully placed fiber optic cameras while remaining invisible. The ghost in the machine. The witness they'd failed to eliminate. Gerald Brecker arrived first, at 11:30, 30 minutes early. The old cop's training showed in his approach. He parked 2 blocks away, approached on foot, weapon drawn, checking corners and shadows. He entered through the front door, which Daniel had left unlocked, and swept each room with professional efficiency. But he didn't find the cameras, didn't detect the presence above him. Brecker positioned himself in the dining room, in a corner, with clear sight lines to all entrances, waiting. Thomas Whitmore came at 11:50. Less cautious, more arrogant. He walked straight up the driveway, his footsteps heavy with entitlement. He'd brought muscle, though. A younger man, thick-necked and cold-eyed, stayed outside by Whitmore's Mercedes, scanning the street. Insurance. But not enough. Richard Castellano arrived precisely at midnight, punctual even in his terror. He trembled as he climbed the porch steps, his breathing audible even through the audio feeds. No weapon, no backup. Just a man coming to beg for mercy or offer deals. The weakest link, just as Daniel had calculated. James Rothman never came. The lawyer was too smart, too careful. He'd sent a message by his absence. He'd let the others walk into whatever trap awaited, while he kept his distance, protected by plausible deniability. Daniel had anticipated this. Rothman would require a different approach. For now, 3 would be enough. Daniel activated the sound system he'd installed, his voice processed through filters that made it seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. The same voice modulation technology law enforcement used. Impossible to trace, impossible to locate. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. The 3 men spun, weapons raising, eyes searching the darkness. Brecker moved to the wall, protecting his back. Whitmore grabbed Castellano and used him as a shield. The partnerships of a decade dissolved in seconds. Predators didn't have friends, only temporary alliances. "Who's there?" Brecker demanded, his voice steady despite the situation. Cop voice, authority voice. "Show yourself! You don't recognize the address?" Daniel's filtered voice echoed through hidden speakers. 10 years ago you murdered 2 people in this house, Marcus and Sarah Morrison. You thought you killed their story too. You were wrong. "The boy," Castellano whispered, his voice breaking. "Oh God, it's the boy. I'm not a boy anymore. Thanks to you, I grew up fast. Learned things a child should never have to learn, like how to track killers, how to gather evidence, how to destroy the men who destroyed my family." Whitmore shoved Castellano forward, putting more distance between himself and the others. "This is bullshit. We don't know what you're talking about. The Morrison murders were committed by transients. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows the lie you told," Daniel corrected. "The lie Chief Brecker sold to the media while you cleaned up your mess. But I was here, Whitmore. I saw you. I saw all of you. I watched my mother die protecting documents that would have exposed your empire of fraud. I heard my father beg for mercy you didn't give, and I survived to make sure you'd pay for every second of that night." Brecker's gun tracked across the room, searching for a target. "If you're recording this, none of it's admissible. No chain of custody, no legal authority. You've got nothing." "I don't need admissible. I need the truth, and I need you to turn on each other, which you're already doing beautifully." Daniel paused, letting the tension build. "Did you know Whitmore's been stealing from you? Skimming millions off the top while giving you pennies? Check your phones, I've sent you the evidence." He watched through the cameras as Castellano and Brecker pulled out their phones, their faces illuminating in the darkness as they scrolled through the financial documents Daniel had sent. The betrayal registered immediately. Castellano made a sound like a wounded animal. Brecker's jaw clenched so hard, Daniel could hear teeth grinding through the audio feed. "You son of a bitch," Brecker said, his gun now pointing at Whitmore. 15 million. You told us it was 5. "Those documents are fabricated," Whitmore snarled, but his voice carried the uncertainty of a man whose lies were collapsing. "He's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "I can see the offshore account numbers," Castellano said, his voice rising toward hysteria. "I can see my name next to deposits a third of what they should be. We killed for you. We destroyed ourselves for you, and you were robbing us the whole time?" The room erupted in accusations, decades of criminal partnership disintegrating into chaos. Daniel let it play out, recording every word, every admission of guilt wrapped in fury. They were confessing without realizing it, validating every piece of evidence he'd gathered. But then Brecker, still the cop even after everything, forced control back into his voice. "Enough. We're being played. Whoever you are, whatever you want, name your price. Everyone can be bought." "Can they?" Daniel asked softly. "Could my parents be bought? Could their lives be purchased? Could their son's childhood be restored with money?" "They were casualties," Whitmore said, and the casual cruelty in his voice made Daniel's hands shake with rage. "Wrong place, wrong time. Your father should have minded his own business. Your mother should have let us take what we came for. They made choices. They paid prices. That's how the world works." "Then let me show you how my world works." Daniel triggered the second phase. The lights in the house blazed to life, blinding after the darkness. Simultaneously, every screen in the house, every phone the men carried, lit up with the same image. Crime scene photos from that night, his parents' bodies, the blood, the destruction. And in the corner of each photo, superimposed, a 12-year-old boy's face. Danny Morrison, the witness, the survivor. "I'm giving you a choice," Daniel said, his voice cutting through their shock. "One of you confesses on camera everything, the embezzlement, the money laundering, the murders, all of it. One confession, detailed and complete, and I take that to the FBI. The confessor gets a deal, cooperation in exchange for reduced charges, maybe even witness protection." "And the others?" Castellano asked, his voice small. "The others face justice for every crime they've committed. Full charges, no deals, no mercy." It was beautiful, watching them process the offer. The prisoner's dilemma brought to life. Betray your partners and survive, or maintain loyalty and burn together. Trust fractured by years of mutual betrayal couldn't withstand this pressure. Join us if you've ever felt the burning need for justice, if you've carried the weight of unanswered crimes in your heart. Subscribe and be part of a community that believes some truths must come to light, no matter how long they've been buried. Your comment might carry a story of your own reckoning. Together we honor those who were silenced and celebrate those who refuse to let their voices be forgotten. Castellano broke first. "I'll do it. I'll tell you everything. Just promise me protection. Promise me they can't reach me." "How, coward?" Whitmore spat, raising his own weapon. "You weak, sniveling—" The gunshot shattered the night, but it didn't come from Whitmore. Brecker had fired, his bullet catching Whitmore in the shoulder, spinning him around. The construction magnate collapsed, roaring in pain and fury. "He's right," Brecker said, his gun now covering both men. "We're done. It's over. Has been since this kid sent those first letters. I'm not dying in prison for you bastards. I'm not protecting you anymore." And there it was, the complete fracture. the total collapse of the conspiracy that had held for a decade. Daniel recorded everything as Brecker forced Castellano to call 911 as they waited for sirens to approach through Millbrook's quiet streets. He recorded Whitmore's threats, Castellano's sobbing confessions, Brecker's cold recitation of crimes and cover-ups. 3 men destroying each other with the truth they'd spent 10 years hiding. The police arrived to find 3 men, 1 wounded, all screaming accusations at each other, and they found evidence scattered throughout the house, documents and recordings that would take months to fully process, but clearly indicated something massive and terrible had been hiding in their quiet town. What they didn't find was the ghost who'd orchestrated it all. Daniel had already slipped away through the basement window, disappearing into the night the way his childhood had disappeared a decade ago. 3 down, 1 to go. James Rothman heard about the arrests before dawn. He had sources everywhere, tentacles that reached into every corner of local law enforcement, every courthouse, every office where information flowed. A deputy sheriff called him at 4:30 in the morning with the news. Brecker, Whitmore and Castellano in custody. Chaos at the Morrison house, evidence everywhere, confessions already starting. The lawyer didn't panic. Panic was for amateurs, for men like Castellano who let emotion override calculation. Rothman had survived 40 years in a profession that ate the weak by staying 3 moves ahead. He disconnected his phone, removed the SIM card, destroyed it. He had go bags prepared in 3 locations, cash and documents that could get him across borders, into countries without extradition treaties. Within an hour, he'd be on the road. Within 24, he'd be untouchable. But as he packed the essentials in his home office, he found something that hadn't been there before. A folder on his desk, plain manila, unremarkable except for one detail: he hadn't put it there. And his security system, state-of-the-art, showed no breach, no entry, no record of anyone entering his home. The ghost had been here, inside his sanctuary. Rothman's hand trembled slightly as he opened the folder. Inside, photographs, dozens of them. Him meeting with known crime figures, him accepting envelopes of cash, him at locations where murders had occurred, dated and time-stamped. A complete documentation of a criminal career spanning decades. But these weren't copies. These were originals, some from his own private collection that he'd kept as insurance, as leverage. Somehow, impossibly, the ghost had accessed his personal safe, his most secure hiding place. And beneath the photographs, a handwritten note. You can run. You've got the resources, the connections, the escape routes, but you'll never stop looking over your shoulder. You'll never trust another shadow. You'll live the rest of your life the way I lived the last 10 years, alone, hunted, consumed by what was taken from you. Or you can end it now. Turn yourself in, confess everything, face justice. It won't give you peace, but it might give you sleep. You have until sunrise. Choose. Rothman stared at the note, his brilliant legal mind calculating probabilities, analyzing options. He could still run. Probably should run. His partners were weak, would crumble under interrogation, but he'd structured everything carefully. Plausible deniability, layers of protection. He might survive this if he moved fast enough. But then he saw the second item in the folder, a photograph he'd never seen before, taken the night of the Morrison murders, taken from inside the house, through closet door slats. The angle was low, a child's perspective, and in the frame, perfectly clear, was Rothman himself. His face, his 13-pointed compass rose pin, his hand holding the gun that had killed Sarah Morrison. The lawyer's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, staring at proof that should never have existed. They'd been so careful. They'd checked the house. They'd found no witnesses, no cameras, nothing. But they'd never imagined a child hiding in a closet with a camera, one of those disposable cameras kids used at birthday parties. They'd never imagined a 12-year-old boy having the presence of mind to document his parents' murder, even as terror froze him in place. "How?" he whispered to the empty room. "You want to know how?" The voice came from everywhere, the same filtered, impossible-to-locate sound that had haunted the others. "You want to understand how a terrified child became your nightmare?" Rothman spun, searching for speakers, for sources. "Show yourself. Face me like a man." "You didn't give my father that courtesy. You shot him in the back as he ran for the phone. My mother, you looked in the eyes. I remember that. You wanted her to know who was killing her. You wanted her to understand the price of righteousness. It was business, Rothman said, and even he heard how hollow it sounded. Nothing personal. Your father was going to destroy years of work, ruin lives, end careers. We gave him chances to walk away. He refused. He refused to be complicit in your crimes. He refused to let you steal from the town he loved. He refused to be silent while you corrupted everything you touched. Daniel's voice, still filtered but carrying the weight of a decade's rage, filled the room. That's not a crime, Rothman. That's called integrity. Something you've never understood. So what now? The lawyer's training reasserted itself, looking for angles, for negotiating positions. You've destroyed the others. You've got your evidence. Turn me in. Let the system handle it. Isn't that what your father would have wanted? Justice through proper channels. My father believed in the system. Right up until the moment the system failed him, when the police chief he trusted was on your payroll, when the law he respected was a weapon you wielded, when justice became just another commodity you could buy and sell. Daniel paused, and the silence stretched like a blade. I don't have my father's faith anymore. You killed that too. Rothman's hand moved subtly toward the desk drawer where he kept a loaded pistol. If he could just reach it, get the ghost talking, distract him long enough. Don't. The command was sharp. I'm not in the room with you, Rothman. I'm watching through your own security cameras, the ones you thought were secure, the ones I've controlled for the past 3 months. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment you thought was private, I've been there. A ghost in your machine, a witness you can never eliminate. The lawyer's hand froze. His mind raced through implications. 3 months of surveillance meant evidence beyond what was in the folder. It meant recordings, documentation of ongoing crimes, proof that would bury him regardless of what happened to the others. What do you want? He asked finally. Money? I have millions hidden offshore, access to accounts that could set you up for life. Power? I have connections that could make you untouchable. Name your price. You still don't understand. Daniel's laugh was bitter. I don't want anything you can give. I want what you took. And since I can't have that, I want you to feel what I felt. The helplessness, the fear, the knowledge that everything you built is collapsing and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Rothman stood, moving to his window. Dawn was breaking over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The same sky that had risen over his parents' corpses 10 years ago. The same indifferent beauty that continued regardless of human tragedy. I'm 73 years old, he said quietly. Prison at my age is a death sentence, you know that. My mother was 41. My father was 43. They didn't get to grow old, didn't get to see me graduate, get married, have children. You took their future. Now I'm taking yours. So you've become me, a killer, a destroyer. Congratulations, boy. You've proven that revenge transforms the Avenger into the monster he hunts. Maybe, Daniel admitted, but I'm a monster who serves justice. You're just a monster. The sirens started in the distance, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Rothman realized with cold certainty that the choice had never really been his. The ghost had already made it for him. They're coming for you, Daniel said. FBI, not local police, can't be bought, can't be intimidated. I've sent them everything, every photograph, every recording, every document. Your 3 partners are singing like birds, trying to cut deals by burying you deeper. You're done, Rothman. The only question left is whether you face it with whatever dignity you have left, or whether they drag you out in handcuffs. The lawyer looked at the folder, at the photograph of himself murdering an innocent woman, at the evidence of a lifetime of crimes he'd thought untouchable, at the end of a career built on the suffering of others. Does it help? He asked. Destroying us. Does it ease your pain? Bring them back? No, Daniel said, and for the first time his voice carried something other than rage, something that sounded like grief, raw and endless. Nothing brings them back. Nothing fills the hole they left. But at least when I close my eyes, I won't see them dying unavenged. At least their story doesn't end with injustice, and maybe somewhere they know I didn't give up. I didn't forget. I carried them with me until I could carry them home. The sirens were close now, turning onto Rothman Street. The lawyer straightened his tie, an absurd gesture of dignity in the face of ruin. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm sorry. Not for what I did to them. I'd make the same choices. But I'm sorry you had to witness it. No child should see what you saw." "You're right," Daniel agreed. "No child should. That's why you're going to prison. So no other child has to." The FBI agents swarmed the property with the efficiency of a well-planned operation. They had warrants for everything: arrest, search, seizure. They'd been building their case for weeks, using the evidence Daniel had provided to construct an airtight prosecution. Rothman surrendered without resistance, allowing himself to be cuffed and led away. At the last moment, before they put him in the car, he looked up at his security camera. "I know you're watching," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope revenge is everything you need it to be." The car door closed. The convoy pulled away. And in a hotel room across town, Daniel Morrison watched it all on a laptop screen, his finger hovering over the delete button that would erase his digital trail, his ghost identity, his decade of preparation. He didn't feel triumph, didn't feel the satisfaction he'd imagined in all the years he'd spent planning this moment. He felt empty, hollowed out. The rage that had sustained him, that had given him purpose and direction, was gone. And in its absence, he discovered something terrifying. He didn't know who he was without it. The boy who loved superheroes was dead. The son who trusted the world was dead. The Danny Morrison who'd had parents and a home and a future was dead. All that remained was the weapon he'd forged himself into. And now, with the mission complete, he didn't know what he was for. Daniel closed the laptop, looked around the anonymous hotel room that could have been anywhere. He'd spent 10 years becoming someone who could destroy his parents' killers. He'd sacrificed education, relationships, normalcy, any chance at the life his parents had wanted for him. He'd made himself into something dangerous and empty and alone. And now it was done. The question that haunted him as dawn light filled the room wasn't whether he'd done the right thing. It was whether the boy he'd been would recognize the man he'd become, whether his parents, looking down if such things existed, would be proud or horrified by what their son had transformed into in their name. He'd never know. That was the price of revenge. It gave you justice, but took your innocence. It gave you victory, but took your soul. It gave you an ending, but never the one you truly wanted. Daniel packed his few belongings, erased the last of his digital presence, and prepared to disappear one final time. Not as David Martinez, the journalist, not as the ghost who'd haunted Millbrook's guilty, but as himself, as Daniel Morrison, survivor, avenger, and now somehow the one who had to figure out how to live after spending a decade learning only how to destroy. He left Millbrook as the sun climbed higher, the town waking to news of arrests that would dominate headlines for months. 4 pillars of the community revealed as monsters, a decade-old murder finally solved, justice delayed but not denied, and somewhere in the mass of humanity beyond that small town, a young man drove toward an uncertain future, carrying ghosts he'd avenged, but could never fully lay to rest. This was the journey of one soul consumed by the need for justice, transformed by the weight of vengeance, and left to navigate a world where victory feels like loss. How many of us carry our own ghosts? How many wounds hide beneath the surface, waiting for the courage to be addressed? If you've ever felt the ache of injustice, the burden of wrongs that time didn't heal, or the complex emotions that come with finally letting go, this community is for you. Subscribe and become part of a space where we explore the deepest corners of human experience, the pain, the resilience, the cost of justice, and the hope of redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about the moments that changed you, the losses that shaped you, or the victories that came at unexpected prices. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. Together, we celebrate not just the triumph of justice, but the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of being human. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like if this story moved you, and remember, the end of one journey is always the beginning of another. The question is, who will you become?